Hi chums, how are you? I'm in Paddington Station today, in the very heart of West London. Now Paddington Station to most people will mean literally one thing of a generation, particularly now of course, all thanks to our late and brilliant monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, and of course that wonderful cameo that celebrated her Platinum Jubilee, Paddington Bear. Oh yes, there's even a statue here. But Paddington is so much more. And also literally moments away from Paddington Station is a sort of place, how can I put this nicely, that is so associated with so much royal history so far. And more importantly, it was so associated with such royal history that one would have thought the former royal known as Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, former cable TV actress Meghan Markle, that she might have wanted to be associated with it. But then we found out this. So on today's very special by royal appointment, I wanted to take a closer look at exactly what happened when Meghan waved goodbye to Paddington, and more importantly, the trials and tribulations that happened along the way. Either way, some of the insight may just shock you as to just, well, some might say, is it typical Meghan behaviour or not? You know, chums, I've spent hours upon hours outside this particular area of the hospital. That is, of course, the famous Lindo Wing. Lindo Wing at Paddington Hospital, the private healthcare that only you and I could possibly dream about. I've been in there. It's an incredible place, let me tell you. And more importantly, not only is it an incredible place, they really do look after you, but it is 5-star deluxe, as one would expect. So, you know, when you are offered that sort of treatment, you would think, yeah, I'll jump at it. Now, also, people will remember that for days upon days outside here, all the camera crews from around the world for, of course, those royal births, right from really Princess Anne, and then, of course, the likes of Princess Diana, and, of course, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, then the Duchess of Cambridge. Well, they were here for days, and this literally generated a lot of money for the hospital, an incredible amount of money when you think about it. Now, they made absolute fortunes because here's the thing, what people don't realise is, for instance, the company that I was working for, we were parked outside for 6 weeks, but I don't know if you know this, but the sort of doctors, nurses and everything like that, they were put on a 3-month waiting list, which meant they couldn't go on holiday, they couldn't go too far out of London because they never knew when they were going to be called upon for those royal births, right? You can understand, you get the picture. But of course, this particular framework, this doorway, was then internationally famous. And as I said, there was literally every single major news network here. It became something of a family, but also, as I've remembered today, it became something of a wind tunnel because at this particular time of year, it's not too bad, but in the depths of when we covered some of the births, it was particularly freezing. Not only that, you know, if there was another royal sort of hospital visit, then we had to go to that as well. And that could be very, very chilly indeed. So it's interesting to learn, isn't it, exactly when you look back at this particular story. And now, given the fact that Meghan Markle has decided once again to share more and more of her children online or via her Instagram, that this caused such a big royal rumpus. And it's hard to imagine because now, literally, we've just seen pictures of Meghan with some child. Some people suspect this is not, of course, Lily, but somebody going to visit the bees. Now, as we know, contradictory in term, but the bees, of course, is a big hobby for the Princess of Wales. I think you're particularly brave, Mom, personally. I'm always running away when the bees come out, but there you go. I love what they make, though, don't we all? Delicious on a bit of toast. But here's the thing, the background to this story is absolutely phenomenal because when Meghan Markle, famously, you know, announced that she was going to be expecting a child, she thought literally everything was going to be coming her way. And it did come her way because, as we've seen already, Her Majesty the Queen had literally bent over backwards to make sure that Meghan felt very much part of the family. And Harry pushing away in the background, well, you would have thought that naturally things would have gone down the usual royal route. This is because this particular doorway became literally famous, all thanks to a senior member of the British monarchy. That's right, Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal, Princess Anne. Now, as many people know, I know Princess Anne very well, lovely lady, very forthright, and yes, to send our good wishes to her, still has the occasional headaches from that terrible situation where she was kicked by a horse or knocked by a horse, whatever. She battles on. I love this woman. She's terrific, you know. Just carries on with no sort of sympathy vote or anything like that. But way back, of course, when she had her children, this was a massive break in royal protocol. You see, most royal children up until that point had been born inside Buckingham Palace, or any palace, in fact, if you look back in their history books. And there were two reasons for this, really. It was all about privacy, and more importantly, it was all about, well, keeping it away from the public. You presented the child as and when you were ready, and normally, as we saw, and we know this as a sort of fact, it's presented on an easel outside Buckingham Palace. The crowds go nuts, and that's the great thing. It's a delightful moment in British history. We know the monarchy's safe, we know the next in line, we know what's going to happen. But you see, when Princess Anne decided that she wanted to break royal tradition and actually have her children born here, well, that did cause something of a rumpus, because obviously her father, the Duke of Edinburgh, His Royal Highness Prince Philip, and the Queen, Her Majesty, well, didn't really understand it. You know, they came from another tradition. Obviously, she thought this was just going to carry on. But in fact, what the Princess Royal did, Princess Anne, was break a lot of tradition and actually make royal births something of a centrepiece, a big moment to be celebrated, to be looked forward to. And as she pointed out, you know, and this is the other side that people don't realise, Princess Anne broke a lot of ground with so many different things, because not only did she have her children here, but as we all know, she decided against giving them titles. That caused a lot of controversy too, because she felt that, you know, perhaps they would want to grow up with or without a title. And it's a similar sort of thing that's gone on, if you like, with the Duchess and Duke of Edinburgh, Sophie and Edward. You know, they've got titles, but not at the level. They could go a little bit further if they wanted. It's fascinating insight into how monarchy works. But as we found out with Meghan Markle, titles literally mean everything. She pointed that out with a sit down with Oprah Winfrey. But there was a bigger battle behind the scenes, literally before even the birth of Archie. Let me explain. When Meghan and Harry announced the birth of their first child, or the fact that she was expecting a child, of course, there was great excitement. Whatever Meghan likes to say in those interviews with the likes of Oprah Winfrey and various others, over here in the United Kingdom, we were absolutely delighted. She was very much welcomed within, you know, the British way of life. And seemingly for a short while, she seemed to like it, particularly going around visiting various towns and cities ahead of her wedding, if you remember. Even going to Sussex for a very brief period and meeting the locals there. So this really was sort of the icing on the cake after a very spectacular royal wedding the previous year. You know, people thought, wow, this is now exactly how we expect the fairy tale to go. Now, as we know, Meghan doesn't really believe in that sort of fairy tale. As she pointed out, it's not about marrying the prince and the princess. She always wanted her own seat at the table. She was very clear about what she expected and what she wanted. And that's where this got really interesting, because right from the off, according to a source working with her, she felt that Meghan felt people assumed she was just going along with what they'd already decided, i.e. tradition. And it wasn't something that she fancied doing at all, whatever. And this was very much outlined from the off, but didn't exactly filter back to Her Majesty the Queen. Now, just cast your mind back, because this is very important. By this point, whatever people say, Meghan and the Queen had had something of a difficult, fractious relationship. And this had been all battled around really at the start of the wedding with the whatever Meghan wants tiara moments. And then it had been fed back, of course, that the Duke of Edinburgh felt that she was like the Duchess of Windsor. And the comment about the very white dress on the wedding day had also filtered back too. So Meghan didn't exactly feel warm and fuzzy towards the British monarchy. Those were her feelings, apparently. Now, what we were told by Meghan is the fact that, well, if you remember, she was suffering from all sorts of problems, feeling isolated, having no friends, all of that sort of stuff. And as I told you in a previous video, that wasn't really the case, because the Queen very much reached out and said, you know, if you want friends to come over, if you need more family, just let us know. Don't feel alone, we're always here. But you see, Meghan wanted the monarch's attention 24/7, forgetting that she is a ruling monarch with red boxes to deal with, government ministers to meet, and of course visiting dignitaries, various charities. That is a full-time job. But suddenly, Madame Markle decided that, well, no, the focus should be the fact that I'm now carrying a succession, there you are, a line of succession in the British monarchy. And she had very much studied, according to a source, and as ever, allegedly, the sort of treatment that Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had received, and felt naturally in due course that she should have the same. Now, where this gets very muddied watered is the fact that in Meghan's version of events, she was cut off for months on end and her car keys were taken away and her passport and all that sort of stuff. And we all know that's a tissue of lies because Meghan did fly around, and let's not forget she had that baby shower. But that was another bone of contention because you see, once she'd had the baby shower, which we don't normally have over here in the United Kingdom, but nonetheless, why not have one over here, invite loads of your friends over to experience your new way of life? Well, it wasn't going to be the new way of life, was it? They'd already decided that this was... Thank you. Well, that wasn't going to be a new way of life, was it? It was going to be a different way of life. And the bottom line, you see, for Meghan was simply this, that she decided, well, no, I want it in New York and I want it to be a focal point. And what we saw were all those stars, of course, literally piling up into that very swanky hotel, celebrating the birth of another child within the monarchy. And of course, this was very much pumped out that this was going to be a biracial child, a first, of course, once again in the British monarchy, and we should all be waving flags, etc. That was the deal. But back over here in London, things were starting to fall apart. This is because Meghan had outrightly refused to have any attention from, of course, the royal physicians, the royal doctors. Now, I don't know about you, let's be blunt. If you were offered the absolute best medical care in the world, treating Her Majesty the Queen, treating, of course, the Duke of Edinburgh, who lived a long life, so you're going to think, wow, these people certainly know how to look after you. Why would you spurn that wonderful offer? Why would you say no? This baffled the Queen, as you can imagine, but more importantly, didn't just baffle the Queen, started to baffle Prince William. At first, Her Majesty the Queen put this down to just, first baby nerves, etc., and not sure exactly what, she felt she could have. But the Queen wanted Meghan to have the very best medical attention. She had a huge soft spot, of course, for Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, and she could see how much this news had made him delighted, happy, and a lot freer. She knew that he desperately wanted to be a father, and she also knew that this could be the making of him. He'd often talked about wanting children, and she realised that when he visited various children's charities, he literally came alive. Not only that, he'd been an incredible uncle so far to the very young Prince George, so she could see what was developing, what was going to happen. So she called Harry in and said, don't be worried about it, naturally you can avail yourself to all the medical assistance that you need. This apparently was taken on board by Prince Harry and fed back once again to Markle. But apparently there was a deafening silence. So once again somebody was asked, is there anything that you need, etc. And it literally went quiet. I mean, quiet for weeks and weeks. However, apparently, according to this excellent source, the Queen just figured, well, this is the modern way, this is what they want to do, that's fine. She didn't want to push herself in and get involved. It's not her way, it wasn't her way. She wanted to help, but from a distance. So when she did get the opportunity to see both Meghan and Harry, she once again said, but apparently there was just a silence, a sweet smile, but nonetheless a silence from Meghan Markle. So the Queen began to feel this was a little bit, well, shall we say, not nice. I mean, she could have just simply said it's very kind, but no, I've made my own arrangements. But nobody knew what those arrangements were. Apparently they were under lock and key, total secrecy. This is because they decided that they, in their eyes, according to the staff that were there at the time, who now no longer work for that particular regime, they apparently were worried about this getting out in the media. And this was the very first moment that Her Majesty the Queen and senior members of the monarchy first heard the fact that Meghan did not want to be paraded on the steps of the Lindo Wing after giving birth. Right. Now, think about this. You see, there was Harry, and according to a well-placed source, Harry loved this idea because naturally it would be history repeating itself. There he was, obviously in his mother's arms, like of course his elder brother was, and it was there, wasn't it, the whole history. But apparently Meghan didn't like that. She didn't like the idea. Why should she have to parade the child? Why did it need to be that? She felt there was no reason for it. Now, once again, according to a well-placed source, this was reiterated back to Meghan, that this was sort of part and parcel of the job. What job? Well, the job is the fact that you share your good fortune, your good life, everything that you need with the British public. Let's not forget, less than a year earlier, we'd spent a fortune giving Meghan Markle the glitziest, starriest royal wedding we'd seen in many a year. And in return, what she'd given us was one family member and a bunch of people that she'd never met attending her own wedding, which had not gone unnoticed by the late Queen. Everything was fed back to Queen Elizabeth. She totally knew what was going on. Make no mistake, chums. So, once again, it was suggested, is there anything they can help? Now, apparently the Queen felt that eventually Meghan might relent, given the fact that there was such a public appetite for this. And apparently she felt that why should she, this is Meghan, follow in the footsteps of Catherine? She was already having to do that by curtsying and following her around. She didn't seemingly want to, paraphrase the same thing again, doing exactly what apparently Catherine had to do. She wasn't going to do it. And then it went dead and literally just went quiet. Nobody truly knew what was happening with the birth of the child. And everything around that particular area and everybody that you speak to that was there at that point was literally stunned. Then the story came around that perhaps Meghan now might be looking towards the Portland hospital, but apparently also she favoured a home birth. And that could be out in Windsor. Now, that apparently pleased the Queen because what better? Windsor Castle, a Windsor baby. Nice idea. But then, of course, like everybody, and this is exactly how this played out, Meghan's story once again took another twist. Because like the rest of the world, and everybody knew exactly as it was coming to the fruition, not one real senior member of the British monarchy exactly knew where the birth was going to take place, despite what you may have read in the media. If you remember, everybody thought that Meghan was in the Portland hospital or was on the way there. They were all apparently ready back after 2 hours, sitting on a sofa like that with Doria and the picture. And consequently, the idea really was, and what stumbled around was, well, what was the true story? What was the secrecy? Well, according to the source, you see, both Harry and Meghan again wanted to keep the media at bay. They didn't like the idea of having to play the media game. But one might suspect, of course, when you think about it, and if you remember also, that there were certain people from certain major American networks that had been tipped off about their whereabouts and what they were doing. Who did that? Either way, things started to take a turn, not for the better, for Meghan Markle. Naturally, the Queen was the very first person to be told, we are told, about the birth of Archie, soon to become Prince Archie. But what was interesting was the Queen was very upset by the fact that Meghan had decided to literally bypass the opportunity to carry on a very, much loved royal tradition. You see, the Queen understood the fact that it's a give and take situation with the British public. They like to celebrate your happiness along with their happiness. And by doing it the way that they'd done it, of course, it literally ripped that opportunity away. And what was interesting about the whole situation was, basically, the Queen and other senior members of the monarchy didn't know literally any much more than what was being put out on the media on a regular basis. A strange thing and a way to operate, don't you think? Of course, another situation that developed further down the line was the official sort of meet and greet, which, as we now know, according to Prince Harry, Meghan wasn't very happy about doing that either. And that took a lot of persuasion, a lot of coercion from senior sources, basically saying, no, the public need to see this, they need to see the baby. Now, as we know, when they did that now famous walk down in, of course, Windsor, you couldn't really tell what the baby was. It was so well covered up, nobody really got a glimpse of it. It was a real sort of, Disinterest factor, not from Harry. He looked desperately happy, but having to be on his best behaviour so that he didn't offend his wife. Meghan looked like she couldn't care less about being there and didn't want for once the camera to focus on her or indeed the baby. Fast forward, then we had of course the christening, and there we had a delightful picture, but that was kind of around it. After that the whole thing fell apart. And so when people talk about, well, as Meghan had in the interview with Oprah Winfrey about the difficulties of Archie's birth and suddenly the things that she's now decided to share on podcasts and on her own podcasts, well, this all comes as great news and revelations to senior members of the British monarchy and indeed senior courtiers that were looking after Meghan at the time. There was no talk of any of this. There was no talk of any illnesses, no problems. None of those things ever came up, and it's not for want of trying. They asked on a regular basis, is there anything they could do to help, to alleviate any problems? No, Meghan said she was fine, and all she needed was in fact Harry. So once she had him, what more did she need? So consequently, when people talk about this situation now, which is very strange, and I think this is the reason why so many people are fascinated by this particular child, is that we don't know him. That's the true story over here in the United Kingdom. But what we do know now is more than ever, all thanks to Meghan's ability to suddenly decide to share her children with the world, but at the request of a woman who'd given her so much, our late and brilliant monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, to simply just pop out on the steps of a very exclusive hospital with every single thing at your fingertips, all for free, all paid for by the monarch. You couldn't do that. But if you want to then take your child out, say, to make cookies on an Instagram video, well, that's acceptable. That's not exploiting, isn't it? And that's the thing, really, I've been told by certain individuals at least, why they could never really forgive Meghan Markle. She turned away so many wonderful opportunities, and in the later part of her years, Queen Elizabeth would have made her very happy. Just simple things like that. She never really got to see the child much. There was no growing relationship with Prince Archie at all. And the story of her trotting up and down to Windsor for Lily's birthday party is farcical in itself. There is no written record or indeed picture. If there was, that would have been used by now. And so there you have the mystery of Prince Archie and the missing obvious appearance at the famous Lindo Wing. And what we now have is really, well, a couple that are desperately trying to relight their own royal court, when in effect some people might say their own two children, Harry's children, well, they've now missed out on all of that wonderful rich royal history, the tapestry of what could have become their lives in the future. And now what you're doing is literally trying to shore up some interest by people that have no real association with the British monarchy. They're simply celebrity bookers, PR people, multi-skilled people, whatever you want to call them. They don't have the background that you could have given these two children. But the biggest takeaway from this story is literally this. Why was Meghan so opposed to having any senior member of the royal medical team? Why was that such a big problem? And why was it such a smack in the teeth back, of course, to our late monarch? And on top of all of that, just the natural thing of being kind to someone in their later years, particularly the Duke of Edinburgh and, of course, Her Majesty the Queen. She could have come away with a lot better profile and a lot better kindness. But then we really saw what she thought of Her Majesty with that mock curtsy. It's something that will haunt her as a brand image, truly, for the rest of her life. People won't forgive that because the Queen didn't do anything to anybody like that, and she certainly didn't deserve it. But that's exactly what Meghan Markle decided to throw back to her as a thank you for everything that she'd given to her so far. As ever, if you've enjoyed the video, please do like, share and comment respectfully. And thank you for taking the time out to watch by royal appointment. Neil Sean in the very heart of